Hey there. We are here for episode 4 of the voiceover livecast. And we're just going to wait for people to start streaming in here before we really begin. So hang tight. Thomas Nance, you are number 1, the first person in here. Richard, hey. Just getting ready to get started. I'll give it a couple minutes. Mary Kemper, hey. How are you? Morning. Hi, Cindy. Hey there. Shiloh, how are you? I've got our episode fixed and uploaded. So this Sunday we're going to re-air our show, and you'll actually be answering questions that I'm asking. It'll be amazing. All right, I'll just wait a tiny bit more, and we'll get going. Whew. It's a nice day to be in the booth. A little cold outside, but I actually don't have much to work on, which is kind of nice. So yeah, I'll go ahead and get started. So in the updates, I actually wrapped up the book I was working on, a very short book called The Lost Daughter, by Brittany Lewis. And this was the author that I did the trilogy for, about the girl who leaves the religious cult, the Zion series. And this is a little bit different. This is about a girl who moves to another state, and she's adopted, and she finds out some startling things. And I can't really get into it. But anyway, I finished it up and sent it off to production. Hey, Chris. How are you, man? So, since I did that, I'm prepping for my next book, which is a serial killer kind of a thing, a little more gritty. So that'll be fun. And so what happened, though, was this book I was working on was so short, I should have been able to get it done in literally maybe 5 or 6 days. But I got sick, kind of. I had a sinus infection of some kind. Hi, Michael. And which is rare for me, because now I've had 2 sinus infections this year, which never happens. And I was starting to feel it last week. The middle of last week, I was just overexerting myself physically. Just kind of being a busybody, I guess. And so I was really worn out, and then the sinuses started to pick up, and it was just kind of bad. And, when that happens and you're in the middle of working on an audiobook, you have to stop, because there's so many subtle changes that happen in your voice. Chris, if I'm your hero, you've got problems. But we know you have problems, so that's okay. So there are so many changes that happen in the voice. And with this one in particular, it's a young adult book, and the main character is a teenage girl. So sometimes if I'm sick or if I'm hoarse, I can kind of use that to my advantage. Like with this next book, it's going to be a serial killer. So there's a couple characters that, hey Brenda, how are you? So you can use it to your advantage a little bit. Not so with this one, and I'll just read a tiny passage so I can kind of show you what I do with that kind of voice. Jessica tried to open up Google, but her phone couldn't connect to the school's internet. That figures, she mumbled under her breath. She swallowed and then took a deep breath when she saw her father pull into the parking lot. I hate this so much. I feel so uncomfortable with them now, she thought, fighting back tears. I just want to know who Mary is. Why did he say those things about doing this to protect me? What does that even mean? Is Mary dangerous? So it's a teenage girl, so there's obviously usually going to be an octave kind of change. Hey, Charlene. But you don't really do that with this kind of work. It's more about modulation and just kind of lightening up and using a different part of the voice. And when I'm sick like that, those higher, not higher, but different, the changes you need to make with more finesse are a heck of a lot tougher. So if I'm trying to do that, is Mary dangerous? A couple days ago, it was all squeaky. I mean, I just couldn't do it. So, hi, Jeff. So I just kind of had to wait, and fortunately, I had recorded enough beforehand that I was able to edit and do a couple pickups, which means, if I see something that I flubbed up or messed up a word, I can just go back and record a sentence. And that's okay. Usually can get away with that, but just not whole paragraphs. But anyway, I recovered. I'm feeling good. So that's that. And I'll get more into that kind of stuff in future episodes. All right. So today, I'm going to narrate a passage from one of my favorite audiobooks, The Long Harbor Testament by Tom Minder. I did this toward the end of 2017, and it's just a really cool book. It's got mobsters and priests and murder and all kinds of stuff. It's a really busy story. It's pretty fun and kind of intense, too. And this guy, he lives in New Jersey. And this was kind of one of those deals, one of the rare ones, where I didn't get to kind of talk with him beforehand about the book. Hey, Lori, you are definitely not first today. So we didn't have discussions about characters and just to get kind of our heads around what he wanted out of it. It just kind of a different type of production. So did the best I could, and we're friends on Facebook, and I've seen him do a lot of book signings for his work, which is really cool. And anyway, this was just a fun story, so I'm going to have a link to the video. I think I might already, but I'll add one. And I do have some free codes available for it that you can use on Audible. So if you're interested, let me know. Hey, Tom. Okay. Hey, the author is here. That's great. So now the pressure's on. Now I've really got to read this thing. Of course, I'm not recording, so, and again, I do the punch and roll method. So usually when I'm recording, I would, if I mess up, I'm going to stop and go back and redo that just to make the editing process a little bit easier. And not today. I'm just going to go ahead and roll with it, and we'll go. So this is pretty early on in the story. Gabe was preparing to leave the office for the day. He planned to go to his apartment, nuke something quick, drink a few beers, and fall asleep in front of the television. The phone rang. It was Jim. Gabe, what are you doing tonight? How about we grab something at the wharf? There's someone I need to meet there, and I'd like you along. Gabe sighed. Only for my brother. Okay, drive over here. We'll go over in my car. You have to promise that if I drink too much, you'll drive me home. Done, Gabe. I'm not going to drink much either. I need to be clear-headed. The wharf was hopping for a Wednesday night. Silvio was holding court with his work crew for celebrating the zoning victory. His workers, while lousy tradesmen, were good at running betting slips and collecting from deadbeats. Silvio paid his men well for their work and their discretion. This rezoning would mean more work for the crew. There might even be some plumbing work coming out of it. Gabe entered, wiped his hand from the sticky doorknob, and sat himself at a table. Jim had been collared outside by a parishioner. Imagine meeting your priest going into a crummy bar, Gabe thought. That could only happen to Jim. He ordered chili over rice and a draft for himself and Jim. The chili at the wharf was well thought of by the bachelor clientele. It was hot and meaty. Taking a long pull of his beer, he took in the customers that evening. The usual blue-collar tradesmen, including some of his own. He also noticed Professor Amos from the community college who was downing a draft, plowing into a plate of chili, and looking towards Silvio's table while trying not to be conspicuous. You're out of your element here, You're out of your element here, Professor, Gabe thought. Silvio and his men were enjoying themselves. A lot to celebrate after last night's victory. Gabe had just finished his first draft and ordered another when Silvio spotted him and walked over. He sat without being invited. Eyeing Jim's chili, he picked up his spoon and tasted. Hey, not bad. Listen, Cooper, I saw you with my son this morning at Lucy's. You and him appear to be pretty chummy. What's going on? First you're hugging my wife in my own home, and now you're being daddy to Rico? Silvio picked up Jim's draft and took a few gulps. Why don't you get your own family and leave mine alone? Maybe find some sweet girl who will put up with your holier-than-thou attitude and drive you home from the wharf when you're too screwed up to drive. I had a sweet girl years ago, but I let her go. Now she's married to a thug. Silvio turned red, then smiled. Cooper, this is a good evening for me, and I'd hate to spoil it by having to kick your ass. We're adults, you and me. I'm going to keep smiling and forget what you said. Just know that I can make you disappear as easily as you can make that draft disappear. Leave me and my family alone before you end up in the harbor. He stood, wiped his mouth on Jim's napkin, and started to walk away. Carla had taken in the whole encounter. Silvio waved to her. Hey, Carla, another draft for my friend, Gabe. He turned to Gabe. And, by the way, your sweet girl is cheating on me. I always suspected you, but could never prove it. Now I think that you're too weak to turn her head. Gabe took this in. Maybe Silvio was right. Jessie had this simmering sensuality about her that she wasn't afraid to flaunt. Maybe he wasn't enough for Jessie after all, he thought, except as a friend. He signaled Carla for another spoon and napkin and a new plate of chili for Jim. A few minutes later, Jim entered, wiped his hand from the doorknob, and spotted Gabe. He sat and looked at his draft. It didn't appear to be completely full. He picked up the mug anyway. Gabe, realizing that Silvio had drank from it, raised a finger. Too late. Jim downed half of the remaining beer. Sorry about that. I got into a discussion on Sunday music of all things. He looked down at his chili. It looks hot and filling. What else does a man need? He said as he picked up his spoon and dove in. Gabe was feeling no pain. Ah, my brother the father. How the hell are you? So, are you here to save the wretched or to kiss Silvio's ass? Jim realized that Gabe was half in the bag. Gabe, I'll explain later. I'm here to get Silvio out of my life and the lives of those other dopes like me who owe him money and a pound of flesh. I'm done with gambling, and I'm done with creeps like Silvio destroying people's lives. It's time Silvio got what's coming to him. He drained the rest of his beer, stood, and walked over to Silvio's table. He said something that Gabe couldn't hear, but which got a rise out of Silvio's men, especially Sal. Silvio stood, waved off his men, and walked with Jim over to the corner of the bar. Jim was angry and reaching into his pocket. Silvio was smiling. Here's your 2,000. I'm done with gambling, and I'm done with you and your threats. Jim shoved the money at him. Silvio appeared ill at ease and looked around. Geez, Jim, don't do something like that here. I'm glad you're paying up, but actually, I was going to cut you a break after your fine endorsement last night. You've done a good thing for Long Harbor, Fortunato Brothers, and Galante Supplies. Why don't you go home to your cathedral? Tomorrow, mail 1,500 to Fortunato Brothers. Then we're square. Jim leaned into Silvio's airspace. Silvio, I'll mail you the 2,000, and then I'm going to write a letter to the editor of the Long Harbor Press saying that I retract my endorsement of the zoning change. Don't worry, I'm not stupid enough to implicate you. I'll just say that the environmental concerns, including air and water pollution, caused me to rethink the overall benefit. All rather civil, I'd say. Silvio moved nose to nose with Jim. Not a wise move, Padre. I have as much dirty laundry on you as you have on me. Gambling, sneaking around with Miss Gillick. Those alone would cost you your residency, and probably send you back to Cambria to serve the bishop in whatever hellhole position he can find. He put his hairy hand on Jim's shoulder. Believe me, Jim, we can all benefit by letting this situation play out. When you come to your senses, you'll see this. And who knows? In a few weeks, if you miss the thrill of pissing money away on point spreads that you don't understand, maybe we can do business again. Jim started for his table but turned around and said in a too loud voice, Silvio, everyone's crimes catch up with them. You'll learn that soon enough. It won't be long before this town is rid of you and your band of thieves. Padre, you've had a long day. Why don't you go home and sleep on things? And sleep on things. Sal will drive you home, Silvio chuckled. Or to whatever you want to get off. Jim waved off Sal. Just watch your back, Silvio. Things happen in this town. He walked past Gabe and out the door. Gabe waved at Carla to pay his bill. Silvio walked over. Leaving too, Gabriel? Not a good night for the Cooper clan. Both of you should stay out of my life. It's better for everyone. Handing Carla 2 20s for the chili and drafts, Gabe was about to walk out when he realized she had been the one with Silvio when he almost ran him over. Gabe winked at Carla. He knew this would piss Silvio off. Good night, young lovers. Sleep tight. Leaving the wharf, he found Jim standing in the corner of the lot staring at the harbor. He was next to Silvio's parked Explorer, which was taking 2 spaces. Are you okay, Jim? Gabe asked. Jim turned towards Gabe. You know, Gabe, Hold that thought, Gabe said, and walked over to the driver's side of Silvio's Explorer and relieved himself onto the front tire. Now, you were saying? Jim turned to Gabe after looking at the wet tire and puddle. You know, Gabe, except for a few physical characteristics, you and I aren't very similar. You're the hard-working, no-nonsense, upright citizen who can always be counted on for help. I'm a parish priest who can't write a decent sermon, has a gambling problem, and will sell out his town. Face it, you're the good brother, and I'm the bad. Gabe sobered enough to respond. Jim, you're admired in this town by people of all beliefs. You've done good things. You're human, though, like the rest of us. I'm not sure how deeply you've stepped into things lately, but it looks pretty nasty and involves Silvio. Now it looks like you're trying to make good. Just be careful around Silvio. He's not the kind to forgive and forget. As for being the good brother, maybe I haven't taken advantage of the opportunity to be bad, but I'm tempted, like everyone else. He belched and continued. I hope I can continue to do the right thing by folks, but I have my demons. Drink, for example, and my desire for Jessie. I just hope that if I stumble like you claim to have done, that I can right myself and get on with my life. He laughed out loud enough to make Jim look around to see if they were being overheard. You know, Jim, this whole good and bad business, I'm not so sure I can make the distinction sometimes. Maybe there are times you have to do something people think is bad in order to make things better. Who's to say? Gabe, let me drive you home. You're in no shape to drive, and I still have a few things to do tonight. Jim paused. And at the end of the day, I'm just a man myself, with flaws that make me question life as well. He smiled at his brother. Maybe we both need to sober up. Gabe took one more admiring glance at his artwork on Silvio's tire and said, I need to walk home. Maybe the air will do me good. Take my car and do what you need to do, then drop it off at my place later on and leave the keys in my mailbox. He handed Jim the keys to his Prius and started walking towards his apartment. 2 miles, but not a bad evening. If only the scenery would stop moving around. Jim got into Gabe's car and honked as he drove by. He seemed on a mission. Hey, Tim. Hey, Gary Bennett. In the studio bricks. It's a very nice place to be, huh? All right, one small section here. Jim drove out of town and found himself behind an older woman doing about 15 under the limit. He followed her for a mile or so, hitting light after light. He didn't recognize her as a parishioner. The opportunity finally came to Passer, and he pulled in front and had to slam his brakes not to go through the next red light. This caused the woman to have to jam her brakes. She honked at Jim. He returned a single-finger salute and drove off as the light turned green. The woman was shocked, but had the presence of mind to record the license number. She pulled over and called the police. Detective Porfino was working late and answered. "This is Claire Woodward from Glen Heights. I want to report a reckless driver. He pulled out in front of me, and I had to jam on my brakes. Then he flipped me the bird and drove off. I got his car type and his license." Mark stifled a laugh and took the car make, yellow Prius, and license. "Did he appear to be drunk, Mrs. Woodward?" "I couldn't tell. The bastard was sober enough to flip me off." Porfino realized that he'd never want to get on her bad side. "Okay, ma'am. What did he look like? Was it a kid?" "No, actually, a dark-haired man, around 40 or so." "Okay. We'll have the patrol keep an eye out for him. Thanks for calling." Porfino relayed the information through the dispatcher. He ran the license against the DMV database. It came back, Gabriel Cooper, 280 Jackson Circle, Long Harbor. Well, well, he thought. I never would have expected that. Jim pulled onto Longshore Drive in the Willows section of town. He parked at the end of the street and walked to number 118. He knocked lightly after looking around to make sure he wasn't being observed. Jan Gillick answered the door and dropped her jaw. "Jim, what are you doing here? We agreed that we would only meet away from Long Harbor. This is dangerous." Jim walked in. "Jan, we need to talk." Okay. Ooh. There's so much more. And that the whole middle finger thing becomes an integral part of the story later on. It's quite interesting. That is, again, an excerpt from the Long Harbor Testament by Tom Minder. Let me see if I can check out some comments. Okay, nobody's talking. Let me know if you have any questions. I got a few more minutes here. Anything at all. Voiceover. Voiceover or not. Actually, I should explain the shirt. This is actually from a cover album from my 2011 album, Softer Than Stones. I haven't worn it in a while, but like I've mentioned in my live music, don't stop there. Okay, maybe I'll read it a little bit more, Shirlene. I'm going to be doing a lot more originals, and so I'm going to go through that album and figure out what I can kind of redo, kind of like I've done with that Everybody song, which is now called Go Away, because everyone wanted it to be called Go Away. Thank you, Tom. Glad you could be here. Hope everything's going well with the book signings, and this is a really fun one to promote, and I'll keep it up. Okay. Shirlene, you got it. I'll keep narrating here. Silvio left the wharf about 45 minutes after Gabe and Jim. He was feeling pretty good. He had a buzz on and had handled the Coopers. Saying goodbye to his men, he was about to open his Explorer when he noticed that his front tire was stained and that he was standing in a puddle. It had rained earlier, but this didn't look like water. Silvio realized what had happened. What kind of a drunken lowlife would do this? Then it dawned on him. Cooper. That's it. I'm going to find that guy and kick his ass. He looked around. Gabe's car was gone, but it wasn't like him to drive drunk. He guessed the good Father Jim, his sainted brother, poured him into his faggy Prius and took him home. Silvio slammed his hand onto the door of the Explorer, shouted, "That bastard!" climbed in, amped up his jazz CD, and took off toward Gabe's apartment. At the same time, an unobserved acquaintance started his pickup and followed at a distance. Silvio followed Harbor Drive and plotted how to make Gabe regret his actions. He saw a dark figure slowly making his way along the harbor walkway. He was heading east toward the Jackson Place apartment complex. Gabe. Perfect. Silvio pulled into a parking area at the dock and slipped into a handicapped spot. He jumped out and slammed the door with the engine still running. "Cooper," he called. "You're a dead man." Silvio. Shit, Gabe thought. I should run, but my feet wouldn't cooperate. Time for negotiating skills. Silvio, thanks for thinking about my safety, but I really don't need a ride. The walk will do me good. Thanks anyway. Cooper, you pissed on my tire, and I got it all over my shoe. Gabe suppressed a laugh. Sorry, Silvio. I thought I was relieving myself on a stranger's tire. No harm meant. Stomping over, Silvio stood in front of his inebriated nemesis. Grabbing Gabe by the shirt collar, he shook him violently back and forth like a rag doll. He clenched a fist and prepared to punch Gabe. Unfortunately, the shaking caused Gabe's body to seek relief wherever possible, so Gabe simultaneously shit himself and projectile vomited onto Silvio. All right, I didn't know that part was coming up. Oh, hang on. As he surveyed the combined beer and chili on his shirt, Silvio fumed. However, he unclenched his fist as he saw no spot to hit Gabe where he wouldn't be landing on vomit. Instead, he threw Gabe towards a pile of debris. There was a yelp as Gabe landed. He had fallen on a small dog in the process of relieving himself. The dog ran away barking its displeasure at the inconvenience of having its constitutional interrupted. Gabe sat up and realized that his shirt and pants were covered with mud and crap. Perfect. Silvio laughed. Now you know how it feels. Here's some number one to finish your experience. With that, Silvio kicked Gabe in the ribs and shoulder with his urine-soaked boot. Get up, Cooper. We've just started. And actually, I am going to stop there. Yeah, I know. Because this leads to, like, the major event. I can't reveal it. This is, it's available on Audible. I have codes for it, so don't be shy. Ask me for one if you'd like to listen to this book, or even just read it. It's on Amazon. All formats: print, Kindle. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting. And let's see. So, other than the book that I've just finished and sent to review, and we'll see how that goes. It's the young adult book. Shirlene, you might be interested in that. That's called The Lost Daughter. So that's got to be reviewed by the author, and she'll send me updates, maybe some pickups to do. We'll see how that goes. But I expect it to be available first week of April, probably. And that's one that I'm prepping the rest of today and tomorrow. I'll get that started officially by the weekend. Probably take a few weeks. And then I start a series, what should end up being a series of, it's a romance set in the West in the late 1970s. It's going to be pretty interesting, and I'm doing some voiceover work for her, the author's trailers. She's got video trailers that she's doing, so we're going to have those coming out. So I'm actually really looking forward to that. And I haven't read the first book yet, but they may be tame enough where I could use Rick Barr and not my romance pseudonym. So we'll see about that. Never know until I get into it. And again, I'm not going to tell you what the pseudonym is. I just couldn't do that. So anyway, folks, thanks for joining. Hope you enjoyed it. I think next week I might try something a little different. Rather than narrate a book, I don't know, I'm going to do something else. So stay tuned. Have a great day.